They called me the Angel's Hand. For 16 years, I had maintained the Galer Field generator arrays aboard the Eternal Vigilance, a lunar-class cruiser serving the battle fleet Obscurus. My work kept 20,000 souls safe from the Immaterium's touch during warp transit. I calibrated the resonance matrices, verified harmonic stability, logged field integrity readings every 6 hours, without fail. The tech priest said my devotion made me blessed. The navigator trusted my maintenance reports above all others. I believed I served the Emperor's protection itself, that my prayers and technical precision formed a shield against darkness. My name is Thaddeus Kaine, and I want you to understand, I maintained the cage that broke us all. The Eternal Vigilance ran routes between Cypher Mundi and the Forge world Lucius for 9 years before I joined her crew. She was old, her machine's spirit temperamental, but steady when properly appeased. I learned her rhythms the way a parent learns a child's breathing. The primary generator hummed at exactly 417 cycles per second when healthy. The backup arrays idled at 392. I could hear deviations of 2 cycles from 3 decks away. This was not pride. This was survival. In the warp, precision meant the difference between passage and damnation. My station was Generator Cathedral 3, located amidships between the crew quarters and the primary cargo holds. The space was 30 meters high, a Gothic vault of brass and iron where 12 field generators stood like pillared saints. Each was 8 meters tall, wrapped in prayer parchments and anointed with sacred oils every watch. The air always smelled of ozone and incense, sharp and clean. The temperature held steady at 18 degrees, cold enough that my breath misted during the night watches. I wore the red robes of the Mechanicus lay servitors, though I was flesh-born and unaugmented. My hands were scarred from cable work and blessed by the Omniscience priests. I was proud of those scars. My routine was sacred. I woke at the 5th bell, 30 minutes before dawn cycle began. The ship ran on Terran Standard Time even in the warp, maintaining the rhythm of the Emperor's throne world. I broke fast with ration bar 7 Alpha and Recaf, ate while reviewing the night shift's logs. Then morning prayers in the crew chapel, the litany of protection recited with 200 voices. The words felt powerful, real. By His will we endure. By His light we navigate. By His mercy we return. I believed every syllable. By the 8th hour, I was at my station. First inspection took 90 minutes. I walked each generator's perimeter, checked the seal integrity on every access panel, verified the purity of the sanctified oils in the lubrication reservoirs. I tested the backup power relays, confirmed the emergency shutdown protocols were armed and blessed. I logged everything on data slate and in the great leather-bound maintenance journal that had recorded this work for 3 centuries. My handwriting joined that of 16 previous chief maintainers, all faithful servants who had kept the generators pure. The field generators themselves were beautiful in their purpose. Ancient Martian engineering wrapped in Imperial faith. Inside each column, exotic matter spun in precisely calibrated orbits, creating a bubble of real space around the ship. The math was beyond me, but I understood the principle reality needed constant reinforcement when surrounded by unreality. The generators were prayer made manifest, faith-given mechanism. When they sang their 417-cycle hymn, the warp could not touch us. We sailed through hell protected by the Emperor's grace and human ingenuity combined. I had trained under Master Technician Gavin Meller, who had served 42 years before his heart finally failed during a rough translation. He taught me that the machine spirits demanded consistency. "They know your touch, Thaddeus," he would say while we worked. "They feel your intention. Routine is ritual. Ritual is respect. Respect ensures protection." He showed me how to whisper the right prayers while adjusting the harmonic dampeners, how to feel the generator's mood through the vibration in the deck plates. He died believing he had served well. I wanted the same death. Decades hence, confident I had protected others. The crew trusted my work absolutely. Captain Ashara Ven ran a disciplined ship. but she deferred to technical expertise in technical matters. When I signed off on the field integrity reports, she accepted them without question. When I requested maintenance supplies or prayer candles or sacred oils, the quartermaster provided them. When I recommended we delay departure for 12 hours to properly consecrate a repaired relay, the captain adjusted the schedule. This was trust earned through years of perfect service. I had never given them reason to doubt. I lived in compartment 717, a small cabin I shared with no one. Most crew berthed in communal quarters, but senior technical staff earned private spaces. Mine was 3 meters by 4, containing a cot, a footlocker, a small shrine to the Omnissiah, and a writing desk. I kept it austere. The walls were bare metal painted institutional gray. The only decoration was a copy of the Imperial Aquila above my shrine, its golden wings reflecting the candlelight during evening prayers. I owned nothing I could not carry if the ship were lost. This was wisdom. In the void, possessions were hubris. My few friends were other technical staff. Engineer Lucia Vex, who maintained the plasma drives. Armsman technician Piotr Rusk, who kept the defensive turrets operational. Medici orderly Chen, who treated the minor injuries inevitable in shipboard work. We shared meals in the senior staff mess when watches aligned, spoke little of personal matters, much of our work. This was appropriate. The ship was our life. Our duties defined us. Personal ambition or desire seemed petty against the vastness of our mission. We carried grain to forge worlds, returned with weapons for the crusade. We were tiny, but essential gears in the Imperium's vast mechanism. I found comfort in this. The eternal vigilance made the warp transit from Cypermundi to Lucius 17 times a year. Each journey took 18 days subjective, sometimes 19 if the currents were difficult. We traveled safe routes through relatively calm regions of the Immaterium. The navigator, Ophelia Castana, was skilled and cautious. She chose paths well away from the major warp storms, avoided regions where the veil grew thin. Our passages were routine to the point of tedium. The crew joked about it. Smoothest ride in the subsector, they said. The vigilance lives up to her name. I believed our safety came from faith and discipline. The generators were always perfectly maintained. The navigator was always properly rested before transit. The crew always observed the proper rituals before entering the warp. We prayed together before breaking from real space, asked the Emperor's blessing on our passage. We prayed again upon safe return, gave thanks for protection. This was not superstition. This was acknowledgement that we lived by the Emperor's mercy, that our machines alone could not save us. The ship's confessor, Father Mikhail, led these prayers with fierce conviction. His voice thundered through the vox grilles, and we responded as one body. We were faithful. We were protected. I never questioned this arithmetic. During transit, I increased my inspection schedule. Every 3 hours, I walked the generator cathedral, verified the readings, listened to the machine's spirits, humming prayers. I slept in 4-hour blocks, ate at my station, kept constant vigil. This was not required by regulation. This was personal dedication. The generators protected us. I protected the generators. Symbiosis. Several times I caught minor issues before they escalated. A harmonic drift in Generator 7. A coolant leak in Generator 3's primary coupling. A prayer parchment that had come loose from Generator 11 and needed resanctification. Small problems that would have grown into larger ones. Each time I filed a report, received commendations, felt satisfied I had served well. 16 years, 17 transits per year, 272 successful passages through the warp. Not once did the fields fail. Not once did the ship experience daemonic incursion or crew madness or any of the 1,000 horrors that could afflict a vessel in the Immaterium. Our safety record was exemplary. Captain Venn mentioned it during my annual reviews. The Vigilance has the best transit record in the battle fleet. Thaddeus, your dedication is a large part of why. I accepted the praise humbly, deflected credit to the Emperor's protection, but privately I felt accomplished. I was good at my work. I kept people safe. What greater purpose could a man serve? The other maintainers in my department were competent, but less devoted. Technician Harrow performed adequate work, but lacked the spiritual understanding that made maintenance into worship. Technician Vex, Lucia's cousin, was skilled but cynical, saw the generators as pure mechanism with no divine spark. I tried to teach them better practice. Lead by example, but some people cannot hear the music in the machine. I did not judge them harshly. Not everyone received the calling. As long as they performed their duties adequately, I could compensate for their spiritual deficiency with my own devotion. I remember the last normal day with crystalline clarity. It was the 114th day of the year 817, Amdred 41. We were docked at Ciprimundi, taking on cargo for the run to Lucius. I performed the pre-departure inspection, found everything perfect. Signed off with my usual notation, AL systems within acceptable parameters. Machine spirits properly appeased. Field generators blessed and ready. Transit approved from technical standpoint. Captain Ven countersigned. Navigator Castana filed her route plan with Battlefleet Command. The crew attended the departure prayers with proper reverence. Father Meckel anointed the main blast doors with sanctified oils while we sang the hymn of leaving. Everything was correct. Everything was proper. Everything was routine. We broke from real space at 1400 hours ship time. The transition was smooth, barely noticeable. The Geller fields activated perfectly, all 12 generators achieving lock within milliseconds of each other. The field strength read 98.7% of theoretical maximum. Excellent, well within operational parameters. I recorded the reading in my log, whispered a prayer of thanks to the Omnissiah, and began the first transit inspection. The generators hummed their 417 cycle song. The air smelled clean. The temperature read 18 degrees exactly. Everything was as it should be. Navigator Castana's voice came through the Vox grill 3 hours later, calm and professional. AL sections, this is navigation. We have entered a region of moderate turbulence. Transit time may extend to 20 days subjective. No cause for concern. Continue standard watch routines. Navigation out. This was not unusual. Warp currents were never perfectly smooth. Sometimes we hit rough patches that slowed our progress. The navigator would adjust course, find calmer channels, bring us through safely as she always had. I noted the announcement in my log and continued working. The first sign of wrongness came during my 6th-hour inspection. Generator 9's resonance had shifted. Not drastically. Not even enough to trigger the automatic alarms. But I heard it, felt it through the deck plates. 417 cycles was now 416.3. A deviation of 0.17%. Within technical tolerances, but unusual. I cross-referenced the sensor logs, confirmed my perception. The deviation was real. I performed immediate diagnostics, checked the power couplings, verified the exotic matter containment was stable, examined the prayer parchments for any that might have degraded. Everything appeared normal. I recalibrated the harmonic dampeners, whispered the litany of realignment, adjusted the input frequency by 0.08%. The resonance stabilized, returning to 417 cycles within 10 minutes. I logged the incident, noted the corrective action, marked it for deeper analysis after transit. Minor maintenance issues happened. This was why we maintained constant vigilance. 8 hours later, Generator 4 showed the same drift, 417 to 415.9. I performed the same diagnostics, found nothing obviously wrong, made the same adjustments. It stabilized. I logged it. Noticed a pattern beginning, felt the first small scratch of unease. 2 generators showing identical symptoms within 8 hours of each other was unusual, but not impossible. Harmonic resonance could spread between units if their maintenance cycles were synchronized. I had serviced both units on the same day, 4 days before departure. Perhaps I had introduced some minor inconsistency in my calibration work. I made a note to stagger maintenance schedules going forward. By the second day of transit, 7 of the 12 generators had shown the drift. Each time I corrected it. Each time it stabilized. Each time it returned within hours. The deviations were minor, but their persistence disturbed me. The pattern was too regular, too consistent. I pulled maintenance records going back 5 years, searched for any similar historical behavior. Found nothing. The generators had always been stable during transit, varying by no more than 0.03% once they achieved lock. This repeated drifting was unprecedented in my experience. I filed a report with the chief engineer, Marcus Thorne, a gruff man with 40 years in the Mechanicus proper, before transferring to Navy service. He reviewed my data, stroked his augmetic beard, spoke in his flat cybernetic monotone. Tolerances are within acceptable parameters, Thaddeus. If it exceeds 1% deviation or begins affecting field strength, wake me regardless of hour. Otherwise, maintain standard monitoring. Warp transit always introduces stresses. The machine's spirits feel the Immaterium's pressure. This is normal. He closed the file, dismissed me. I wanted to argue, to insist this felt wrong, but he was senior and experienced. I accepted his judgment, returned to my station, tried to quiet my unease with prayer and routine. But the unease would not quiet. Because during that conversation, I had seen something in Thorne's augmetic eyes. A flicker, brief, before the flat cybernetic calm reasserted. He was not as unconcerned as his words suggested. He knew something I did not, or suspected something he would not voice. This realization settled into my gut like cold iron. My superior officer was lying to me about the machines I maintained, about the systems keeping 20,000 souls safe from the warp's touch. I tried to rationalize it. Perhaps he did not want to create panic over minor issues. Perhaps he was simply being cautious, not wanting to alarm the crew until he confirmed a real problem existed. Perhaps I was being paranoid, seeing conspiracy in simple caution. I wanted to believe these explanations. I wanted to return to the comfortable certainty I had felt 7 days ago. But doubt, once seeded, grows quickly in fertile soil. And my faith, I was beginning to understand, was exactly such soil. The generators continued their slow degradation. By the 4th day, field strength had dropped to 96.2%. Still within safe parameters, still adequate for protection, but declining when it should have been stable. I worked constantly, adjusting, recalibrating, praying over each unit. I slept 3 hours a day, ate at my station, stopped attending the daily prayer services. The other maintainers noticed, asked if I was well. I told them I was fine, just being cautious during the turbulent transit. They accepted this, returned to their own duties. None of them heard what I heard in the generator's song. None of them felt what I felt in the deck plates. Or perhaps they did, and simply refused to acknowledge it. On the 5th day, Navigator Castana announced transit time was extending to 22 days. Her voice was still calm, still professional, but I heard the edges of strain. Warp navigation was psychically exhausting, even in calm conditions. Extended transits in rough seas pushed navigators to their limits. I had seen Castana after difficult passages, gray-skinned and trembling, requiring days of rest before she could work again. If we were still 15 days from translation, she was already dangerously fatigued. Why had we not translated back to real space, allowed her to recover, then re-entered the warp on a better heading? Standard procedure for difficult transits was to break the journey, not push through. I voiced this question to Engineer Vex during a brief meal break. She looked at me with tired eyes, shook her head slowly. Captain's orders. We're carrying priority cargo for the Forge world. Medical supplies for plague treatment, apparently. 3 days delay could mean thousands dead. So we pushed through. She returned to her food, did not meet my gaze. Something in her tone warned me not to pursue the question. I ate in silence, felt the wrongness growing, like ice in my chest. Priority cargo was understandable, but the captain would never risk the ship and crew to save a few days unless the situation was desperate, which meant either the cargo was more critical than Vex stated, or something else was compelling the decision. I went to the cargo manifests, pulled the records for our current load. Grain, munitions, machine parts, standard supplies. No medical cargo at all. Vex had lied to me, or someone had lied to her. The manifest I accessed might itself be false, of course. Perhaps the medical supplies were classified. Perhaps I lacked clearance to see them. But the lie's existence was the point. Someone did not want the crew knowing why we were pushing through such difficult transit. Someone was keeping secrets. That night, I could not sleep. I lay in my cot staring at the ceiling while my mind chased questions in circles. The generators were degrading in identical patterns. The chief engineer had dismissed my concerns, despite clear evidence. The navigator was being pushed beyond safe limits. The cargo manifest contained lies or classified omissions. And we were 10 days from translation at minimum, possibly longer if conditions worsened. Something was badly wrong. But what? And why the secrecy? I rose at the 3rd hour, dressed, walked the empty corridors to the generator cathedral. My footsteps echoed on the metal deck. The ship groaned around me, her hull stressed by forces I could not see. I passed crew quarters where people slept, trusting their lives to the systems I maintained. Their faith in me was absolute, but my faith in the truth I had been told was crumbling. The generator cathedral was quiet except for the machine's humming prayer. All 12 units stood in their niches, prayer parchments fluttering in the ventilation currents, votive candles burning before each like offerings to ancient gods. The Aquila mosaic on the ceiling looked down with stern golden eyes. I had cleaned that mosaic myself, spent hours on a lift platform scrubbing grime from the Emperor's wings. I had believed I was serving him directly, that my work was sacred, that the Imperium systems were righteous and true. I walked to Generator 9, pressed my hand against its warm brass casing, felt the vibration of the machine spirit within. 415.8 cycles. Still declining, still wrong. I closed my eyes, whispered prayers I had recited 10,000 times before. The words felt hollow now, empty sounds echoing in an indifferent universe. When had that happened? When had my faith begun to fracture? The answer came with cold clarity. It had fractured the moment I realized I was being lied to. Not because lies themselves destroyed faith, but because lies revealed the liars did not believe their own doctrine. If the system was righteous and true, why hide the truth? If we serve the Emperor's plan, why deceive the servants? The presence of lies proved the liars knew something was wrong with the truth. And once I saw that, I could not unsee it. I spent hours in the cathedral that night, running diagnostics, checking maintenance logs, searching for any explanation that would let me return to comfortable certainty. I found none. Instead, I found more questions. The exotic matter reserves were depleting faster than they should during normal operation. The backup power systems showed unusual drain patterns. The secondary field projectors had been activated 3 times during this transit, something I had not been notified about. Someone was diverting power, running the generators harder than rated specifications, burning through safety margins without telling the maintenance staff. At dawn cycle, I confronted Chief Engineer Thorne in his office. I brought the data, showed him the power consumption graphs, demanded explanation. He looked at the evidence with his augmetic eyes, processed it with his enhanced cognition, then spoke in that flat monotone. The navigator has requested additional field strength to compensate for warp turbulence. This is within my authority to provide. Your concern is noted but unnecessary. He tried to dismiss me. I did not leave. Additional field strength requires additional power. Additional power stresses the generators. Stressed generators fail. If the generators fail during transit, we die. All of us. 20,000 souls rendered unto the warp because we pushed the machines past their design limits. Sir, I must insist we translate back to real space, perform comprehensive maintenance, then resume transit under safe parameters. Thorne's augmetic face could not show expression, but his biological eye narrowed. His voice dropped, acquired an edge I had never heard before. Maintainer Kaine, you are correct that generator failure would be catastrophic. You are correct that we are operating at the margins of safety. What you do not understand is that translation at this position would be equally catastrophic. We are in the hadronial deeps, 600 light-years from the nearest stable system, and the warp currents here do not permit reliable re-entry. We translate now. We risk missing real space entirely, overshooting into the warp's deep layers where even our Geller fields could not protect us. So we continue forward, because forward is the only direction that leads to safety. Your technical expertise is appreciated. Your strategic comprehension is lacking. Return to your station. Maintain the generators. Trust your superiors to make command decisions. He turned away. The conversation terminated. I stood there, data slate in hand, mind reeling. The Hadronial Deeps. I knew that name. Every Navy serviceman did. It was a region of the warp so turbulent that astropaths could not communicate through it, where navigator charts became useless, where ships went missing with regularity. No sane captain would route through it. The longer safe path around added weeks to transit, but guaranteed survival. The direct path through was suicide, unless you had no choice. Unless something forced you to take the shorter, deadlier route despite the risks. I stumbled back to my quarters, sealed the door, sat on my cot with shaking hands. We were not in the Hadronial Deeps by accident. Captain Venn was too experienced. Navigator Castana too skilled. They had chosen this route, or someone had ordered them to choose it. Why? What could possibly justify the risk? I pulled up the original departure orders on my data slate, scrolling past the standard cargo manifests and crew rosters to the routing directives. The document was sealed under command authority, accessible only to officers with appropriate clearance. I should not have been able to view it, but Engineer Vex had shared her access codes with me years ago, trusting I would use them only in emergencies. This qualified. The routing directive was clear. Proceed via Hadronial Deeps. Time-critical delivery. Accept all risks necessary to maintain schedule. Signed by Sector Admiral Corbeck himself. Dated 3 days before our departure. Below it, a notation in Captain Venn's hand. Objection noted and overruled. Will comply under protest. The captain had argued against this route. Had been ordered to take it anyway. Had obeyed despite knowing the danger. I dug deeper, accessed the original requisition that spawned our orders. It took an hour of searching through layered files, but I found it. The cargo we carried was not routine supplies. We were transporting 50,000 blank death warrants, presigned by the ecclesiarchy, pre-stamped with execution authorization, lacking only the names of the condemned. They were being rushed to Lucius for a scheduled purge of suspected heretics among the Forge world's worker population. 50,000 people would die, their names filled into those blanks, because someone had decided productivity was insufficient or loyalty was suspect or the quotas simply needed to be met. And we were risking a ship and 20,000 crew to deliver the paperwork on time, because the purge schedule could not be delayed, because administrative efficiency mattered more than human life, because somewhere in the administratum's vast bureaucracy, someone had calculated that losing one ship was acceptable risk to maintain the killing schedule. I sat in my quarters holding this knowledge, feeling it reshape my understanding of everything I believed. This was not corruption. This was not a rogue captain or malevolent administrator. This was policy, proper procedure, the system working exactly as designed. We were risking death in the warp to ensure death sentences arrived on schedule. The math was simple. 20,000 possible casualties to guarantee 50,000 definite executions. The Imperium had made its choice. Human life was a resource to be expended for strategic goals, and I had helped. For 16 years, I had maintained the generators that carried such cargo. I had kept the systems running that enabled this calculus. I had been part of the machine, a faithful gear turning in the mechanism of Imperial efficiency. I had believed my work was sacred. I had been wrong. The generators failed during my 9th-day shift, not catastrophically, not all at once. But Generator 7's resonance collapsed from 415 cycles to 308 in less than 30 seconds. The field strength dropped to 81%, then 73, then 65. The alarms screamed. I ran to the unit, pulled emergency protocols, attempted to restart the harmonic sequence. The generator would not stabilize. Its machine spirit was dying, exhausted by days of overwork, giving up its protection. Chief Engineer Thorne arrived with 3 Mechanicus adepts. They worked with frantic precision, bypassing failed systems, rerouting power, attempting to force the generator back online. I worked beside them, following orders, doing everything I had been trained to do. But I already knew the truth. None of them would speak. The generator was not failing because of maintenance error or mechanical defect. It was failing because we had pushed it past its endurance, because someone had decided the risk was acceptable. After 40 minutes, we stabilized the unit at reduced output. Field strength across the grid held at 87%, adequate but not comfortable. Thorne addressed his adepts and me in clipped tones. Generator 7 is offline for the duration of transit. We continue on 11 units. This is within operational parameters. Increase monitoring frequency to every 90 minutes. Report any deviation immediately. The Omnissiah protects. He left, trailed by the adepts, leaving me alone with the wounded machine. I placed my hand on Generator 7's casing, felt it cooling as power drained away. The prayer parchments hung limp, no longer fluttering in the electromagnetic fields. The votive candles still burned, but their light seemed dim, inadequate. I had failed this machine spirit. I had known it was being abused, had seen the signs of stress, had reported my concerns and been dismissed. Now it was dead, its protection lost, and I was complicit in its murder. Over the next 3 days, we lost Generators 3, 9, and 11. Each failure followed the same pattern. Gradual resonance degradation, sudden collapse, frantic stabilization attempts. Each time we salvaged reduced output. Each time the total field strength decreased. By day 12, we were operating on 8 generators at 71% field strength. This was below minimum safe parameters. This was the threshold where the warp could begin to seep through, where crew would start experiencing nightmares and hallucinations, where possession became possible. The symptoms began that night. Crew members reported hearing whispers, seeing shadows move in peripheral vision, feeling watched by invisible eyes. Medici Chen treated 17 cases of acute anxiety, 5 cases of paranoid delusion, 1 attempted suicide. The ship's confessor led prayer vigils in the main chapel, begging the Emperor's protection, exhorting the crew to maintain faith. I attended, listened to Father Mikhail's thunderous voice proclaim that righteousness was their shield, that the Emperor protected the faithful. I watched the crew pray with desperate fervor, clinging to doctrine, as the warp's tendrils crept into their minds. I could not pray with them. The words would not come, because I knew the truth they did not. We were here because the Imperium valued paperwork more than their lives. We were dying because schedules mattered more than safety. The Emperor, if he was aware of our plight at all, had permitted this to occur. Perhaps he had even ordered it. The calculation was simple, brutal, and perfectly logical within Imperial doctrine. The needs of the many outweigh the lives of the few. 50,000 deaths prevented greater chaos. 20,000 deaths, enabling 50,000, were acceptable losses. The math worked. The morality did not. But the Imperium had never claimed to be moral. It claimed to be necessary. And I was finally, terribly understanding what that meant. Generator 12 failed on day 14. We were down to 7 units, field strength at 63%. This was catastrophic. At this level, the warp was not seeping through. It was pouring in like water through a shattered dam. Crew began attacking each other. A rating murdered his bunkmate with a wrench, screaming about conspiracies and traitors. 3 servants in the galley set a fire, tried to burn the ship, before the voices told them worse things to do. Arbits had to seal 6 corridors where reality was visibly distorting, where the walls bled and the floors became ceilings and time moved in strange loops. Captain Venn ordered all non-essential crew confined to quarters, ordered armed guards posted at critical junctions, ordered summary execution for anyone displaying signs of possession. I watched the Arbits drag a woman past my station, screaming that she could taste colors and hear futures. They shot her in the corridor outside the generator cathedral. Her blood ran into the drainage grills while I worked on the machines, trying to keep the remaining units stable. I did not look away. I forced myself to witness. This was the cost of my dutiful service. This was what my faith had protected. On day 16, Navigator Castana's voice came through the Vox grill, barely human, psychically exhausted beyond endurance. Al Hands, translation in 72 hours. Maintain current heading. The Emperor protects. The transmission ended. I heard something in her voice beyond the exhaustion. Desperation, fear, uncertainty. She did not know if we would survive the next 3 days. She was navigating blind through cosmic chaos, her third eye seared by impossible colors, her mind battered by psychic storm surge, her body pushed past all safe limits. And she was maintaining course because orders demanded it, because the paperwork must be delivered on schedule. Generator 4 failed on day 17. 6 units remaining, field strength at 57%. The ship began to change. Corridors stretched, contracted, twisted into geometries that should not exist. Crew members got lost between decks, found rooms that were not on the ship's plans, encountered people who had died weeks ago. Time became elastic. I experienced 3 minutes that lasted hours, and hours that passed in seconds. The fabric of reality was tearing, and the warp's madness was bleeding through. I saw my first daemon on day 18. It manifested in the generator cathedral during my midnight inspection. One moment, I was alone with the machines. The next, something stood before Generator 1, watching me with eyes that existed in too many dimensions. It was small, barely a meter tall. Skin the color of infected wounds, fingers too long and jointed in wrong directions. It smiled at me with needle teeth. When it spoke, its voice came from inside my skull. You maintain the walls. You keep us out. But the walls are breaking, little maintainer. Soon we will be inside, and you will understand what your faith has hidden from you. I ran, fled the cathedral like a coward, sealed the blast doors behind me, reported the manifestation to the bridge. Captain Venn's response was curt. All decks are experiencing incursions. Arbits are suppressing where possible. Maintain your station. We translate in 48 hours. The transmission cut. I stood in the corridor shaking, realizing no help was coming. I was expected to return to the cathedral, work beside the daemon, continue maintaining the failing generators while reality dissolved around me. I returned, not because I was brave, because the alternative was abandoning my duty, and even with my faith shattered, I could not do that. The generators protected what remained of the crew. If I fled, more people died. The math was simple. So I entered the cathedral, walked past the daemon, which watched me with interest, but did not attack, and performed my inspection. The creature followed me, commenting in its skull voice about my work. You are afraid. Good. Fear is clarity. You maintain these machines with faith, but faith is blindness. Now you see what you truly serve. Slaves tending a slave master's tools, dying to deliver death sentences. Your emperor demands this. Your Imperium requires it. And you comply because the alternative is admitting complicity. But you are already complicit, little maintainer. You always were. I tried to ignore it, focus on my work. But the daemon's words burrowed into my mind. Because they were true. I was complicit. I had been for 16 years. I had maintained the systems that enabled imperial atrocities, had taken pride in my perfect service, had believed my work sacred. I had been a faithful tool wielded by an uncaring machine. The daemon was not corrupting me. It was showing me what I had refused to see. Generator 8 failed on day 19. 5 units remaining. Field strength at 49%. More than half our protection was gone. The ship was now more warped than real space, a fragile bubble of sanity surrounded by infinite madness. Crew casualties passed 3,000. The Arbits executed 200 possessed. Medici Chen worked without sleep, treating injuries and madness in equal measure, knowing treatment was futile but trying anyway. I saw her once during this period, gray-faced and trembling, injecting herself with stims to stay conscious. She looked at me with hollowed eyes and said, "We're going to die here, aren't we?" I had no comfort to offer. I told her the truth. "Probably." She nodded, returned to her work. We both knew the numbers. 5 generators could not maintain adequate field strength for the remaining time. We would lose another unit before translation. Possibly 2. At 4 generators, field strength would drop below 40%. At 3, below 30. At 30%, the ship became more warped than real. The crew would die, possessed or driven mad, or simply dissolved into the Immaterium's screaming chaos. We were already dead. We just had not stopped moving yet. The daemon remained in the generator cathedral, watching me work, offering commentary I could not unhear. It told me about the warp's nature, how it reflected human emotion, how the Imperium's cruelty fed the very forces it claimed to oppose. Your emperor builds weapons of faith and discipline to fight us. But every execution, every purge, every act of brutality in his name creates the very thing you fear. We are you. Your rage, your terror, your despair given form. And the more the Imperium crushes humanity's spirit, the stronger we become. You have been feeding us for 10,000 years, little maintainer. We should send thank you notes. I wanted to deny it, to cite doctrine, to proclaim the Emperor's truth. But the words would not come. Because I had seen the system's logic. I had read the orders that sent us into this hell. I had counted the cost: 20,000 lives risked to enable 50,000 executions. The Imperium created suffering as policy, called it necessity, demanded faithful service to sustain it. And the warp fed on suffering. The daemon was right. We were creating our own enemies, fueling the forces we claimed to combat. The entire structure was circular. Self-perpetuating, a machine that transformed human lives into daemonic sustenance and called it righteous. I spoke to the daemon while I worked, not because I wanted its company, but because it was the only thing in the ship that did not lie to me. Why are you telling me this? What do you gain from my understanding? The creature tilted its head, joints bending in ways that hurt to perceive. I gain nothing. I already have what I want. This ship, this crew. This slow dissolution into madness. But you asked the question, and I respect questions. Questions are the first step toward truth, and truth is my nature, little maintainer. I am the daemon of understanding, born from moments like yours, when faithful servants finally comprehend the systems they maintain. I exist because of people like you. You fed me with your devotion and will feed me more with your despair. This is symbiosis. The daemon's honesty was more horrifying than any lie. It was not trying to corrupt me. It was simply explaining mechanics. I had built it with my faith. It would consume me with my comprehension. This was the warp's economy. Belief created structure, and structure's collapse created power. The Imperium's entire theology was fuel for the forces it opposed, and people like me were the kindling. Generator 2 failed during the 46th hour before translation. 4 units remaining. Field strength at 38%. The ship began to scream. Not metaphorically. The hull itself shrieked. Metal warping under impossible stresses, bulkheads bending into shapes that defied physics. Crew members phased in and out of reality, existed in multiple places simultaneously, aged decades in seconds, or became children again. I saw Engineer Vex in a corridor. Watched her split into 3 versions: one child, one elderly, one already dead and rotting. All three versions turned to look at me, spoke in unison. "It hurts, Thaddeus. Make it stop." Then she flickered out of existence entirely, and I never saw any version of her again. Captain Venn ordered all hands to prayer. Father Mikhail led desperate litanies over the vox grillis, his voice hoarse and cracking. "The Emperor protects. He is our shield and sword. Faith is our armor. Righteousness our weapon." The crew responded in ragged chorus, clinging to doctrine as reality dissolved. I listened from the generator cathedral, heard the fear in their voices, knew their faith would not save them, because faith was the problem, not the solution. Faith was what brought us here. Faith was what kept the machine running, the cargo delivered, the purges scheduled. Faith was the Imperium's most dangerous weapon, and it was deployed against its own people with ruthless efficiency. The daemon watched the prayer service with something resembling pity. They still believe. Even now, surrounded by proof their emperor does not protect, they cling to the doctrine. This is what you call faith, what we call delusion. But we need their delusion, little maintainer. Without it, without the desperate prayers and sacrificial devotion, the warp would be calmer, less nourishing. Your emperor created the perfect system, make people suffer, then give them faith to endure the suffering, then harvest the suffering as fuel. He is the greatest architect we have ever known. "He is not my emperor anymore," I said. The words came without thought, spontaneous truth. I do not know what he is, but he is not what they taught me. The daemon smiled its needle-toothed smile. "Now you begin to understand. But understanding comes too late. You have already served him for 16 years. The damage is done. The machine turned because of servants like you. Faithful, competent, devoted. You were the perfect tool. And now you have broken, and the machine will replace you with another tool, equally faithful, equally doomed. This is the Imperium. This is what you served." Generator 5 failed during the final day before translation. 3 units remaining. Field strength at 27%. We were fully inside the warp now, the thin shell of reality completely eroded. The ship was a ghost, sailing through hell with a crew of the damned. I counted casualties at 7,000 dead, 4,000 possessed or lost to madness, 2,000 unaccounted for in sealed sections where reality had collapsed entirely, 7,000 still clinging to sanity, still following orders, still believing the Emperor would save them. I worked through that final day in mechanical routine, adjusted the 3 remaining generators, maintained their diminishing output, logged readings that no longer mattered. The daemon remained my constant companion, offering observations about the warp's beauty, the colors that existed beyond human perception, the songs sung by dying souls as they dissolved into the Immaterium. I did not respond. I simply worked, because work was all I had left. Purpose without faith, duty without belief, routine without meaning. Navigator Castana's voice came through the Vox grill at the 60th hour. Her words were barely coherent, psychically ravaged beyond endurance. "All hands. Translation in 3 hours. The Emperor. I cannot. Maintain course." The screaming. The transmission dissolved into static, then silence. I knew what that meant. The navigator had failed. Her mind had finally broken under the strain. Without her guidance, we could not translate back to real space. We were trapped in the warp. Our remaining protection failing, our crew dying or worse, our ship dissolving into chaos. I walked to the bridge. I do not know why. Perhaps some final need to witness command's response. Perhaps simple curiosity about how leaders faced certain doom. The corridors were hellscapes, walls running with blood that whispered names, floors tilting at angles that should not exist, air thick with the screaming of things that had never been human. I passed crew members who did not see me, lost in their own private nightmares. Past others who saw me too clearly, begged me to save them, to explain, to make it stop. I had no answers for them. I barely had answers for myself. The bridge was in controlled chaos. Captain Venn stood at her command throne, face gray and set, issuing orders to keep critical systems functional. The primary navigator station was sealed, Castana locked inside, her psychic shields raised to protect the bridge from her collapsing mind. The secondary navigator, a young man named Thomas, was attempting to take over, but he lacked Castana's skill and experience. I watched him work, saw his hands trembling, his third eye weeping blood as he stared into the warp's infinite madness. He would not succeed. We all knew it. Chief Engineer Thorne stood beside the captain, his augmetic face showing nothing, his biological eye moving constantly across status displays. He saw me enter, nodded acknowledgement. Maintainer Kaine. Status of field generators. 3 units operational at 27% combined output, sir. Estimate we have 6 hours before complete failure. Possibly less if we experience another cascade event. Understood. Return to your station. Maintain what you can for as long as you can. I did not move. Sir, we are going to die here. All of us. The navigator has failed. The field generators cannot hold. The crew is already lost. I need to know, was it worth it? The 50,000 death warrants we carried. Did they justify this? Silence fell across the bridge. Officers turned to stare. The captain's eyes found mine, cold and measuring. When she spoke, her voice was level, controlled, the tone of a woman who had made peace with impossible choices long ago. Maintainer Kaine, you are out of line. Return to your station immediately, or I will have you confined. No, sir. I will not. I have served faithfully for 16 years. I have maintained the systems that protected this ship through 272 transits. I have earned the right to know why we are dying. Thorne moved to intervene, but the captain raised a hand, stopped him. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded once, sharp and final. Very well. You want the truth. The truth is we are dying because the Administratum calculated that one ship's loss was acceptable to maintain the purge schedule on Lucius. 20,000 lives against 50,000 executions. The math favored the executions, so we were ordered to take the fast route through the Hydranial deeps, despite the risk, because paperwork efficiency matters more than crew safety. This is the truth. This is the system. And I obeyed because refusing orders achieves nothing except my execution and another captain giving the same order. Someone must be willing to serve, Kaine. Someone must be willing to bear the burden of command, make the impossible choices, carry the weight of deaths decided by others. I do not sleep well. I have not slept well for 30 years, but I serve because the alternative is chaos. I heard my voice, distant and cold. You served loyalty over conscience. You killed your crew to obey orders you knew were wrong. The captain's mask cracked, just slightly, just enough to show the exhaustion beneath. Yes, I did. Because I am a coward, Maintainer Kaine. Because I value my life more than theirs. Because I hoped we would survive despite the odds. Because I did not have the courage to refuse and face the consequences. And when you judge me, remember that you also served. You maintained the generators that carried the death warrants. You kept the systems running that enabled this atrocity. We are both complicit. The only difference is I knew what I was doing, and you are only now discovering it. The truth of her words hit like physical blows. She was right. I had been complicit. I had served the machine with perfect devotion, never questioning where we sailed or what we carried. I had taken pride in my work, in my faithfulness, in my technical expertise. I had been a tool, wielded by hands I never questioned. And the tool did not get to claim innocence simply because it did not understand its purpose. Before I could respond, the bridge shuddered, alarms shrieked, the Vox grill erupted with panicked voices. Generator 6 had failed. 2 units remaining. Field strength at 19%. We had hours at most, possibly minutes. Captain Venn straightened in her command throne, addressed her bridge crew with the same controlled tone. All hands, prepare for final degradation. Seal all critical sections. Arbits, distribute weapons to any crew still capable. If we cannot escape the warp, we will at least die on our feet. The Emperor protects. The last phrase sounded hollow, empty ritual rather than conviction. Perhaps it had always been that. I left the bridge, returned to the generator cathedral for the final time. The daemon was waiting, its form more solid now that the field strength had collapsed. It had grown larger, fed by the crew's terror and despair, bloated on the suffering we had created. It smiled at me with genuine warmth. The end approaches, little maintainer. Your last hours, what will you do with them? Pray to the Emperor who abandoned you. Maintain machines that cannot save you. Or perhaps accept what you have become and let the warp take you fully. I ignored it, moved to Generator 1, checked its readings. 18.7% and falling. The unit was exhausted, its machine spirit dying by degrees, giving everything it had to maintain the last shreds of protection. I placed my hand on the casing, whispered apologies to the machine I had abused through dutiful service. It was not the generator's fault. It had functioned as designed. The fault was in the design, in the system, in the calculus that valued efficiency over life. The daemon watched me, tilted its head. You apologize to a machine. How very human, how very futile. But I understand. You need to believe something matters. That your service meant something beyond death delivery. That the machines you tended were sacred rather than simply tools. This is the last stage of faith's collapse, desperate sentimentality. It will not comfort you when the warp takes you fully. I know, I said quietly, but I will offer the apology anyway, because regardless of what the system was, regardless of what I served, the machine deserves better than this end. It gave everything to protect us. That sacrifice deserves acknowledgement, even if the cause was corrupt. The daemon laughed, a sound like breaking glass. You still do not understand. There is no nobility in sacrifice for unjust cause. There is only waste. But yes, apologize to your machine. Cling to your sentimentality. It makes the final corruption more poignant. Generator 1 failed 6 hours later. 1 unit remaining. Field strength at 7%. The ship was fully inside the warp now, barely maintaining a bubble of reality large enough to contain the bridge and engineering. Everything else had been consumed. I stayed in the generator cathedral, alone with the last functioning unit and a daemon that had grown large enough to touch the ceiling. Around us, reality performed impossible dances. The walls showed vistas of alien geometries, infinite libraries of screaming books, oceans of burning tears. The warp was beautiful and terrible in equal measure, a realm of pure emotion without the filters reality imposed. I understood why people went mad when exposed to it. The human mind was not designed to process unfiltered truth. I sat before Generator 12, watched its readings decline, counted down the final hours of protection. I thought about my 16 years of service, the 272 successful transits, the perfect maintenance records I had been so proud of. I thought about the death warrants we carried, the 50,000 names that would be inscribed, the people who would die because paperwork arrived on schedule. I thought about the 20,000 crew members dead or damned because the administratum valued administrative efficiency. I thought about the system I had served with absolute faith, the structure I had believed was righteous, the machine I had helped turn with dutiful devotion. And I thought about choice. I could not undo 16 years of complicity. I could not save the crew. I could not stop the purges on Lucius. I could not reform the Imperium or challenge its calculus. But I could choose how I died. I could choose whether to maintain faith in lies or accept truth in damnation. I could choose between comfortable delusion and agonizing clarity. I chose clarity, not because it would save me, but because I owed the truth that much. I had lived in lies long enough. Generator 12 failed during the final hour. 0 units operational. 0% field strength. The Geller field collapsed completely. The ship dissolved into the warp. Real space's last defense eroded entirely. The crew died or transformed, possessed or driven mad, dissolved into the Immaterium's infinite chaos. I felt reality peel away from my perception, felt the warp flood in to fill the void, felt my own boundaries beginning to blur. The daemon stood before me, fully manifested now, fed to obesity on suffering and despair. It reached out one too long finger, touched my forehead gently. You maintained the walls. You kept us out. But now the walls are gone, and you understand what your service enabled. You fed us with your faith, and now we will consume you with your comprehension. This is the warp's economy. This is what you served. I felt myself dissolving, felt the boundaries of my identity eroding like the ship's hull. My memories began to scatter, spread across the warp like blood in water. I tried to hold on to myself, maintain the shape of who I had been, but the effort was futile. The warp was infinite, and I was finite. The mathematics of that equation had only one solution. Before I dissolved completely, I spoke final words. Not a prayer, not a plea, just a truth witnessed and recorded for a universe that would not remember. I was Thaddeus Kaine. I maintained Geller field generators for 16 years. I believed I served protection. I was wrong. I served a machine that transforms human lives into fuel for its own perpetuation. I was complicit in this transformation. I accepted faith over truth because truth was harder to bear. I am dead now because the machine calculated my death was acceptable cost. I do not know if anyone will ever hear this testimony. I do not know if it matters, but I will speak it anyway. The Imperium is not righteous. It is not just. It is simply necessary, and necessity justifies horrors no morality could excuse. Someone must witness this. Someone must acknowledge what we serve when we serve faithfully. I am that witness, and I testify. The cost is too high. The mathematics are wrong, and we are all complicit in maintaining them. The warp took me then. I dissolved into its infinite screaming chaos, became part of the raw emotion that fueled the daemon's existence. My final coherent thought was simple and terrible. I had spent 16 years maintaining the system, and would spend eternity becoming part of what the system created. This was perfect symmetry. This was justice. This was the Imperium's mathematics made manifest. The eternal vigilance was never heard from again. The cargo it carried, 50,000 blank death warrants, did not arrive on schedule. The purge on Lucius was delayed 3 weeks, while replacement paperwork was prepared and shipped via slower but safer route. 743 suspected heretics were executed during that delay without proper authorization, their deaths recorded retroactively once the correct forms arrived. The administratum logged the vigilance's loss in their casualty registers, assigned a replacement vessel to the route, calculated that 5 years of successful cargo delivery had offset the cost of one ship's loss. The system continued. The machine turned. The mathematics remained unchanged. But somewhere in the warp, in the screaming chaos between stars, a fragment of consciousness retained enough coherence to remember. I am dead now. I have been dead for eternity and 3 seconds simultaneously. Time does not function here the way it did in reality. But memory persists, echoes through the Immaterium, sustains the daemons born from moments like mine. I maintain nothing now except this testimony, this warning, this witness statement for whoever might find it in the dreams the warp sends to sleeping minds, in the visions it grants to those who stare too long into darkness, in the whispers it offers to people beginning to doubt their faith. I was complicit before I was a victim. I served loyalty over conscience. I maintained the machine that consumed me. This is what faith in the Imperium requires: absolute devotion to a system that values efficiency over life, that calculates suffering as acceptable cost, that transforms its own servants into fuel for the forces it claims to oppose. The Imperium is necessary, but necessity is not righteousness, and those who serve it faithfully will discover, as I did, that faith's reward is comprehension too late to matter. The daemon that consumed me was born from people like me, faithful servants who finally understood what they maintained, and in understanding, fed the very thing we feared. This is the warp's economy. The Imperium creates us, and we create the warp, and the warp feeds on the Imperium, and the cycle perpetuates across 10,000 years of grinding atrocity justified as survival. I do not know if this testimony will reach anyone. I do not know if it matters. But I speak it anyway. Cast it into the warp like a message in a bottle across an ocean of madness, hoping that somewhere, someone beginning to doubt their faith will hear it and understand. You who read this, you who question, you who begin to see the cracks in the doctrine, I was you once. I believed as you believe. I served as you serve. I maintained my station with perfect devotion because I thought devotion was virtue. I was wrong. The Imperium does not value your faith, it values your compliance. Your prayers do not protect you. Your work maintains a machine that will consume you when the mathematics favor it. Your devotion feeds the very forces the Imperium claims to combat. This is truth. This is the reality beneath the doctrine. And when you finally comprehend this, as I did, you will face the same choice I faced: maintain the comfortable lie and remain complicit, or accept the agonizing truth and face the consequences. There is no good option. There is no path to righteousness. There is only the choice between what you can live with and what you can die with. I chose truth. I chose to die understanding what I had been rather than living as what the system required. I do not know if this was the right choice. I have never known. But it was my choice, made with clear eyes and steady hands, and I will carry it through eternity. The warp took me. The warp takes everyone eventually. The only question is whether you will understand what you served before the end. My name was Thaddeus Kaine. I maintained the generators. I kept the machine running. I was complicit. This is my testimony. This is my warning. This is what I learned when I finally, terribly understood the system I had served with absolute faith. The Emperor does not protect. The Imperium is not righteous. Faith is not armor. Devotion is not shield. And those who serve most faithfully will die, discovering that the only truth the system teaches is this: you were always expendable, always replaceable, always just another resource to be calculated and consumed. I am dead now. I have been dead for infinite time in this realm where time has no meaning. And I will remain dead, a ghost in the machine, a voice in the warp, a warning whispered to those who are beginning to wake. Listen, understand, choose. And when you face the mathematics that value efficiency over life, remember someone must witness. Someone must testify. Someone must acknowledge the cost. I am that witness, and I testify the cost is too high. The system is corrupt not because it fails, but because it succeeds at transforming human lives into fuel for its own perpetuation. And we are all complicit in maintaining it until we finally, terribly understand what we maintain. This is what I learned. This is what killed me. This is what I became. The machine turns. The mathematics remain unchanged, and the warp feeds on the faithful who finally comprehend their faith's true cost. The Emperor protects, they say, but they never ask, protects what? Protects whom? And at what cost? I asked those questions too late. Learn from my failure. Question before you serve. Understand before you comply. Choose before the choice is taken from you, or do not. Maintain your faith. Serve with devotion. Keep the machine running. And when your time comes, when the mathematics calculate your death as acceptable cost, remember, someone tried to warn you. Someone testified. Someone witnessed. I am dead now. And I will be dead forever, echoing through the warp. A voice crying truth into infinite screaming chaos. This was my service. This was my faith. This was my choice. This is my testimony. May you choose better than I did. May you understand sooner. May you find a path I could not see. But I doubt you will, because the machine is vast and we are small, and faith is easier than truth, and compliance is safer than resistance. Until it is not. Until the mathematics turn. Until you discover, as I did, that you were always just another resource, waiting to be expended. I am Thaddeus Kaine. I was the angel's hand. I maintained the generators. And now I am nothing but a voice in the dark, testifying to horrors I helped create through faithful service. This is the truth. This is the cost. This is what lies beneath the imperial doctrine you serve. May the Emperor protect you, though he did not protect me. The testimony ends. The warp whispers on. The machine turns eternal. And somewhere in the Imperium's vast span, another faithful servant maintains another critical system, believing their devotion will be rewarded with meaning. I believed that once too. I was wrong. So are they.